Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Eugene Hough with the Legacy Marker Program. Program is dedicated to engaging communities to learn about, preserve, and then in turn share their unique historical narratives. As you well know, we've been doing several interesting episodes on the project being conducted down in Chester, and we want to thank Mainline TV and Kevin for repeatedly being able to come down and document this sort of thing. One of the things we've also spoken about is engaging and wanting to engage students. And I've reached out to various entities and everybody says, great, 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 great. And after 9 months, have not made much headway. But fortunately, two of my guests today are here, and it is Tommy Darlington and his father, Tom. And Tommy is a student at Conestoga High School. And Tom, from his professional work, he's thought this would be a great opportunity to possibly introduce Tommy, but also now we've learned that there may be some interest from Conestoga High School at a broader scale. And I want to give a shout out to Radnor High School and some of these other schools. I live in Radnor, and Conestoga is taking the ball down the field, but we want to include other people as well. Tommy and Tom, welcome. Good to see you.
Eugene, how are you?
Real quick, I guess, Tom, we'll start with you just to give a little bit of background, how we met, and then we'll talk with your son a little bit. And we know that you've got to get back to school, so we're on a little bit of a time frame. So we'll begin with that, sir.
Yeah, great. So Tom Darlington, Gene and I met at the Y for interesting purposes. We were working out, trying to stay as good looking as we are. Gene, not me. And we started to talk about, like, you know, I think I had a Navy t-shirt on and you had an Army hat on, and we were talking about like sports, and we got into the whole, what do you do for a living? What do I do for a living? And he says, well, I run this legacy marker program. I'm like, that's interesting. I think my son cleaned some gravestones and stuff like that. So we just started to talk about it, and I felt there was a really good tie-in to what my son is interested in, what I think our community needs to be more interested in, and we're kind of embarking on that right now here over the last couple of months, is figure out how we could help, and we're looking forward to spending time with not only Gene, but also some of the other sites that may be out there in the United States.
I think what's interesting, and again, it was a great conversation and led to where we are, but just to share with both of you, and we discussed this, and Tommy, that 2 years ago, I was approached because there were two gravestones up at the Baptist Church in Malvern, and they're knocked over, and one of them was a Mr. Deemer, and the person with the Historical Society said, you know, Mr. Deemer was an American Expeditionary Force veteran, served, came back, coached football at Conestoga High School, and the football field is named after him. So I said, great, why don't we reach out and see if I'm going to do conservation on this, which I'd be glad to do. Let's get the school involved. And so I think 30 players came out, right. Some alumni. Yeah. It was huge. Yeah. And we were there for maybe less than an hour, but that's an opportunity for the engagement. So now Tommy's brought on board and introduced. He's probably never seen, at least to the extent of how a project like this work, but you came down with your dad, and I'm grateful for that. First of all, just tell me a little bit about you.
I'm Tommy Darlington. I'm a senior at Conestoga High School. I play football and rugby for the school, and I'm just really excited to be a part of this project.
Awesome. And you have some thoughts of maybe going down south for school, college?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of South Carolina, all the school in the SEC.
That's fantastic. What was your impression when you first got to the cemetery? I mean, I know your dad was very good about speaking with you and myself, but it was an interesting situation for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. Just come down and see this gravesite that kind of looked abandoned a little bit and in disrepair. And sometimes you drive around, you wouldn't think nothing of it, but.
And it's a good point because Christie Logan, who will be the second part of the interview with her husband, Scott, she said, you know, it's kind of sad that a site like this that's forsaken and really John Morton, signer of the Declaration of Independence, he was not well health-wise, and he was dealing in an environment that was very tough. So you think of conflict resolution today and differing of opinions and things like that, and that's healthy. But you can imagine back then this document that was going to be signed. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a segue that we're hoping tying in with the students. Have you had a chance to talk to some of your peers at the school?
Yes, I have.
What's been their reaction per se?
I think they're excited to get on this project and stuff. I've been talking to the rugby team. They said we're going to do something with that. Talked to the football team. We already did something 2 years ago, but hopefully we could get something going again. Excellent.
I think that's the important thing, because we need the student environment. We need people in your age group. I know your dad and I can talk about this in the Logans about why this is important, but we really have to get the student involvement. So your involvement coming down at even a basic level will be a wonderful capstone moving forward. And again, anything even from this interview can be shared with other people, and who knows where it's going to go. But you're the pinpoint person. Listen, I want to thank you for being here today. I know you have to race to school. Yeah. And Scott, just Tom, excuse me, give me just a little bit of closure in terms of where you think we are and what we can do.
Well, look, I mean, I think Tommy's excited, and every time you get our youth excited about something, I think the parents get excited and the community will get excited, to your point. As he said, I think the Conestoga rugby program, all the way down to 5th grade is ready to go help out. I think Conestoga, to the degree of the high school boys and girls rugby program, is ready to help out. And give back. I mean, we sat there and talked about it in the graveyard, thinking about some of these folks here were shaping what our country turned out like, how we started this. And to your point, we drive by it or we throw trash in there, and we really need to respect that. And that's something that you've talked about, I've talked about, and we're excited about doing our little part of it, whatever that could be.
Well, we're very grateful, and we're going to keep in touch. And I want to thank you on your busy schedule, and you, sir, on your busy schedule to come in, and we will move forward from this. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
I think it's interesting today, as they say in the military term, a twofer. We're very fortunate because of our previous interviews with the Darlingtons. But the key part of the interview today, importantly, is the opportunity to meet in person Scott and Christie Logan. And the last time, actually, Christie was interviewed she was in Arizona, and I was sitting on the opposite side of the table, and we started the conversation along many platforms about the project. But I think what we're learning, and I have learned, and importantly for the project's purpose, noting that Christie contacted me over 12 years ago about this, is that there's a family connection for her, but she is, and her husband, very dedicated to wanting this project to work. And importantly, she does an incredible job researching and working with maps and doing the things that I just don't have the capability of doing. So I'm very pleased to have Scott and Christie here today. And I think I'd like to have you tell us a little bit about coming here this time and some of your thoughts about what has taken place. And I want to make sure to hear some of your thoughts moving forward with the project, and noting that Christie will be coming back in town possibly in October during the day of service with the DAR in the middle of the month, and hopefully in November. But obviously beyond that, there'll be other things moving forward. So thanks very much for being here.
My story began in 2012 when my family first came here to try to find the location of my 6th great-grandfather, Stephen Cole. We had been able to figure out that he was buried at Old St. Paul Cemetery, but we didn't know where. But we came anyway because it was important. My father was getting elderly, and he had been researching genealogy, family history at that time, probably 10 years, maybe longer. And I had jumped in about 5 years previous because he was kind of stuck trying to figure out where Stephen Cole was buried. And because of the evolution of the cemetery here in Chester, with the original cemetery, 1702, then the 1850 cemetery with the new church, and then the widening of the road, graves have been moved around between Old St. Paul's and Chester Rural. So it's confusing. So anyway, we were believers, we came, but we weren't able to figure out where he was buried. In the next year, I found, along with a researcher friend, about the WPA survey of 1937, and lo and behold, there was Stephen Cole's headstone and fully transcribed in that survey. So my researcher friend, who was a pilot for Southwest Airlines, had a layover in Philly, and he ran down to the cemetery and triangulated everything out to try to figure out which stone was our Stephen stone.
That's fabulous.
And he was just sure. So Scott and I came back the next year in 2013, a few months later, and we did the same exercise ourselves. And it is actually still legible. You can read it.
This most recent visit, you've had an interesting opportunity, and gratefully so for me, sort of boots on the ground, to actually get involved with doing some of the excavation around your family grave site. And just briefly, Scott, because of your background in different areas, you participated in something you've never done before, or is that something you have done before? What were you doing in terms of helping with that excavation and dealing with the soils and things?
Well, I'm a geologist by education, so I have a little bit of experience with rocks and soils. But as far as actually doing an excavation like this was my first time. I was just here to help Christie and hopefully find some documentation on her other family members next to Stephen Cole's headstone. So obviously my job was the strong back and do the excavation and see what we could find next to Stephen.
What were some of the things that you did find?
I found a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, obviously you showed me some of your pointers and I took it from there. So we excavated around these partial stones that were barely visible from the surface of the ground. So we were really confused on how the pieces would fit together. So there were some just laying, within an inch of the surface and half visible. So we removed those stones. There was no notable epitaph or any writing that we could detect on those yet. We'll still try maybe and find some markings. But it was problematic as we excavated. The stones were vertical, and there were two within like a half an inch apart, which was very unusual, I thought. And we excavated. I sieved the soil, found some 2 pieces of old ironwork, obviously very, very old. It looked ornamental, so we're not sure what that is yet. We'll try and have to clean them up and see what we can find.
Sure.
Found an old coin. We got enough of the oxidation off to tell it was a Lincoln penny, but it was a wheat penny. So we know the date range, 1909 to 1958, that was there.
Fabulous.
So we found lots of pieces of glass, amber glass, clear glass. We found some bone fragments. So that was really interesting. So we excavated a pretty good area, probably 2 by 3, 3 by 3 around the stones. And we finally were able to get to the base of the stones. And Christie had found an article the day before at St. Paul's, just on a bulletin board. It said during the 1947 cleanup campaign that was done, that all of the loose headstones were cemented in place. Mm-hmm. And so I found a big chunk of cement at the base of the hole. So they had put 2 stones, partial stones, and just cemented them in vertically. So the second day we were there, that was the project, to chip away at the mortar and get those partial stones out. And they were probably 1.5 or 2 foot by 2 foot, both pieces.
I think the reality is that from you putting the number of pieces of the stones in a box, it may look like a jigsaw puzzle, but it was very surprising. Not surprising because it does happen, but from the surface, as you say, you see a few pieces of stone and you start pulling back and there they all there. So, Christie, your piece, obviously the incredible amount of research you're doing and bringing forward and putting together maps in relation to the cemetery and surrounding template of the downtown streetscape. It's fascinating what you've done with the map piece. Not just, we're looking at the cemetery, but you put in perspective a very important piece as to the overall community, because that's going to help people understand this template platform area. Tell us a little bit about your approach to doing the research and your challenges.
Okay. Let's see, where did I start? I first got excited too about how my family related to the church and the cemetery because through a map, because my family lived there was a market square for Chester, and the cemetery sat on this corner, and my family sat on this corner. So literally across the street, my family lived on the corner across from the cemetery. And so, you're kind of like, wow, they live in the middle of it all. They were right in the middle of it. And they were. And it also shows that the church and the cemetery was in the middle of it. It was the heart of the town, there on Market Square. There were definitely evolutions of the landowners and how that came to be. And it is something that I am going back and reading really old history books and stuff, trying to really piece that together, because the professionally drawn maps at that time there are none. There are not any that show that level of detail. So researchers over the years have drawn maps based on deed records. And so there's several floating around out there of different times and eras. So I'm trying to satisfy myself and do all of that work, which it's tedious, but it's fun.
What was there was an opportunity, I know you contacted me because we know the wall had been damaged, and we're earnestly trying to address that in terms of presenting these insurance estimates to the insurance companies. But you had said, from a standpoint, and other people have said that, you go by and other than the cemetery's there, there's no saying, hey, we're here type of thing. So you had asked, you had some visions about things. I want you to share that, but is there somebody who is an architect? And so what I did, I reached out to my good friend, Richard Buchanan of Archer Buchanan, noted architectural firm, open space planning. And he got back to me with the gentleman's name, and he indicated we should reach out to him. So I sent you that information, and you went with that. And what happened with that?
Well, we met with the architect yesterday morning at the cemetery. Mm-hmm. We walked the property. He looked at it. From the very first time Scott and I came in 2012 and then again in 2013, it was clear that the cemetery was neglected and that nobody was really tending after it. And so we had said, someday we are going to form a group for the perpetual care of this piece of land, because it seems to, it doesn't receive the care that it needs. And so once the DAR got involved and really provided this huge flush of money to get this project going, we talked about it and we're like, our someday is now. So we have formed a friends group, and it is going to be specifically for the sole care of the cemetery in perpetuity. And in the fact that the fence is all going to be redone, we're like, well, why don't we do something to elevate the stature of the cemetery? And it needs to be more prominent in the community. It needs to be more prominent in the state. It needs to be more prominent in the nation. We do have a signer of the Declaration of Independence there, and yes, 4 of my family members. And so we met with the architect to talk about putting some new arches and different things that would elevate the presence of the cemetery in the community when people whiz by in our 21st century lives. So, yeah.
And the timing's really is important. We know that the city is basically bankrupt, and they're having to restructure. But even the architect had mentioned, he said he had never been to Chester, and we both were saying, wow, they have an incredible downtown streetscape, and it's walkable, it's doable. And so I think though we try to share that story with people, why this is important, the city is really going to benefit from this and should be pleased and want to embrace this project because it's going to be good for them. It's something that provides a wonderful historical connection to their past, and whichever way the city goes moving forward, as your efforts and interests, After Marguerite spearheading and getting the funding for this, Marguerite Fritsch, the state region for Pennsylvania, a year from now, there may be another project and they move on. So with all this effort, and we well know the times we've gone down there in the past, you couldn't see anything. It was just high grasses everywhere. It has to be maintained, just like you could say a landscape of a wonderful nursery. So with all these things taking place, we are frustrated at times where it's difficult to get things moving the way we would like them because there's so many people involved. But I think you feel this way, that we are prudently reaching out to those individuals, proceeding on sort of the effort in the cemetery itself. But you had a chance to meet with Barbara Shaw, the former region head for Delaware County, who also is very impassioned, but as she indicated, they will always conduct ceremonies down there. But beyond that, what's going to happen with the cemetery moving forward? So I think this is the direction you're looking at too. Beyond the schematics from the architect, there's various things that need to be looked at.
The whole landscape of the cemetery needs to be improved, and it needs to be befitting of a signer of the Declaration of Independence, but it needs to be befitting for all of those who rest there.
Absolutely. Scott, some of your thoughts in terms of being there, boots on the ground? It's given you a good foothold per se, because your wife is certainly very passionate about it, but for you having the opportunity to get in there like you did, and I had forgotten, I should have mentioned that you were a geologist. Your insights and going about things, those are things we need. And so you feel good about the direction we're going with everything?
Well, I do. It opened my eyes for the amount of work that's left to be done. There's a tremendous amount of work. So it's going to be an effort between a lot more people than just us three at this table.
Absolutely.
So we will need some help, and it's a long road, but I think we can get it done.
In closing, what are some of your thoughts moving forward? Just on the spot.
That's okay. Well, it's been 10 years since we have been here, because it was 2013 the last time we were here. So it won't be 10 years. It's only going to be 30 days and we'll be back. But it actually felt really good to come home to the cemetery, even though it had been a decade. I was overwhelmed really with the amount of work that has been done and the amount of work that still needs to be done. But I feel really good about it. It's going to be great. We're going to get it done with the DAR's help. I mean, they're fantastic what they're giving. And Scott and I are just going to pick up after that, and we're just going to keep going.
I'm very excited. And for my part, I'm dedicated to do whatever I can as best as I can. And what helps me is certainly having dedicated people that want to make things happen, because we can't do it on our own. So we're going to keep in touch. And again, it's always a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
Thanks.